I'm going to do a little refresher here on perspective. If you didn't already watch the previous video or do the reading, please do that. It will reinforce what I'm talking about here, and I'm actually going to give you guys an assignment after I'm done doing this little demonstration. The assignment will be your fourth project. It will take you guys probably a couple of weeks to do. What I'd like you to do is take maybe a photograph and send it to me in progress. Maybe I can give you some feedback. I will do more of these videos just to sort of coach you along. But as far as demonstrations go, this will be the last demonstration I do before I expect you to jump into the perspective project. I showed you guys 1, 2, and 3-point perspective, and each one of those is obviously very important for setting up a composition, and depending upon what you guys decide you want to do for your project, you'll be using one of those conventions of perspective. So if we recall, 1-point perspective is when we have a horizon line, we have a vanishing point somewhere along that horizon line. It doesn't always have to be in the center like I did the demo. It can be off center. As long as everything is vanishing to that vanishing point, all my orthogonal lines, my right angle lines, are going to vanish to that vanishing point. And then I can use transverse lines to, for transverse lines being the lines that run opposite the direction of the right angle lines, I use those to build objects in that space. So that's something that you'll be doing if you decide to use 1-point perspective for your project. If you've not already done what I mentioned about doing sketches in your sketchbook of those 3 different types of linear perspective, you should do that. It's good practice. It helps to get it in your head, because it's difficult to explain it. It's a little bit easier to show it, but for you to understand it, it sort of requires a combination of both. You got to hear it, you got to see it, you got to read it, and you got to do it. If you do all those things together, it's going to make it a lot easier. It's going to make more sense. So for 1-point perspective, that's 1 point. Remember, we have one vanishing point, horizon line, and then all of these right angle lines will vanish to that point. You can always set up a template for yourself. You can always sketch in real lightly with like an H pencil your horizon line, your vanishing point, put in all those radiant lines so that you know where to set your objects up whenever you're going to draw them. So that's 1-point perspective. Now 2-point perspective, now I'm actually going to turn my page here for a second to do this one. 2-point perspective, I'm going to do it down here. We talked about how the idea with that is still putting in the horizon line. This time we have 2 vanishing points. So everything is going to vanish to one or both of these points. So putting in that transverse line and then drawing the diagonals, the orthogonals to, or C to those. From there you can build your buildings, your fence posts, whatever objects would fit into the space. Now say I wanted to take this 2-point perspective image and turn it into a 3-point perspective image. It's actually not too difficult. All I have to do is add in that 3rd vanishing point. Remember, everything's going to be on the diagonal at that point. Anytime you turn something from 2-point to 3-point, all of those transverse lines go away because everything's going to become a diagonal line and it's going to vanish to one of the points. So then that just means that all of these transverse lines have to become diagonals, like this, and vanish to that 3rd point. Now we've got our building going up into space, and we can cut off the top of it so we know where it ends. And now it looks like that extreme point of view, that worm's eye view we were talking about. And then if I flip it upside down, imagine that we're now on top of this building. Still have to draw our lines as if they are angling to these vanishing points so that everything makes sense in the space. It has to be more accurate. When we're doing 3-point perspective, it's really important to continually check and see that all of your lines vanished at the correct vanishing point. See, now down here I have like my city street, and I'm looking down. It's the bird's eye view. Again, it's a little sloppy because I'm not using a ruler. So if you have a ruler to use, straight edge, whatever you got, use it. It'll make this part way easier. This is linear perspective. Focus on lines. But there is also atmospheric perspective, which focuses on value, tone. And you probably remember the example if you did the reading. The hillsides coming forward, and as they got closer and closer, they got more distinct and darker. It's something that you've probably seen in nature before. You know, walk outside of your house in the morning when it's still kind of misty, and you can see the distant hills, but they're kind of obscured by layers of fog, atmosphere. And as the hills work their way towards me, they get more distinct and easier to see. So that's a convention of perspective as well, which could be applied to this linear perspective. Like if you were drawing the buildings, maybe the stuff that's way up here, really high up, isn't rendered quite as fully. It's not as dark. It'll be lighter, and as it gets further and further towards our field of vision down here, if this is the kind of what we're closest to, this area is rendered in more detail. It's darker, it's more distinct. So gradually as it fades off into the distance, it gets harder and harder to see. So how do you draw that? Well, just as an example, I'll show you, since I'm not too worried about linear perspective right now, because I'm not really going to be drawing any objects or buildings or anything. I'm going to think about hillside and kind of replicate what you saw in that image. Say we have some hills here in the background. Hopefully you can kind of make those out very loosely rendered. And then we have that's our distant background. Then we have our middle ground. So now I'm going in with a slightly heavier line. And these ones will have a little bit more tone to them. That's something I could do by charcoal, with my pencil, whatever I was using. And then here in the foreground is where I'll have my heaviest lines, my most distinct and dark values. But you see how it's creating that illusion. Yeah, these are my darkest, heaviest lines. Everything up here is very well defined, easy to see, usually darker because back here is my distant light source, so further away from the light source, the darker it is. And you have these mid-ground, middle ground hills, and then back here in the far distance are our lightest hills. And that's what atmospheric perspective is. A pretty simple convention, but you'd be surprised how much people overlook it and just sort of render everything the same. They have the same line weight. All the lines are the same. That's essentially it. I want to show you one more thing, actually, but I'm going to do it digitally. I'm going to do it in Photoshop, and I'm going to attach it to the second half of this video, so you'll be able to see one more thing I wanted to show you. And then you'll be going onto Canvas, going under the Files link, and there should be posted an assignment there. It should say Project 4, Dealing with Perspective. Of course, you can do those in your sketchbooks. If you do have larger paper, that'd be awesome. If you could use larger paper, it's going to make this way more interesting, more fun. You're going to have more room to fit things in. But use what you got. Guys, we're back. We're doing something digital here in Photoshop. This was actually a project I had my digital imaging class do using Shift-Click in order to create geometric forms and shapes. And so I was talking to them about perspective the same time I was talking to you about it, interestingly enough. So just to show you this convention and how it works for an interior, because all those examples we did were exteriors. They were the outsides of buildings and fence posts and railroad tracks. This is an interior, and you can kind of see it here. I pulled a guide from my ruler here to kind of figure out where the center line, the eye line for me would be. And all I'm going to do is draw a straight line across. That's my horizon line. So most of my lines are going to vanish to a point somewhere along this line. I'm going to create a
vanishing point here. I'm going to make it big enough that you guys can see it. It's probably right about there. Okay. And then I'm just going to jump back to that red color so that you can see this. There's our point. There we go. Now we can see it. So there's an example of how the lines that I've drawn in this room all converge to a singular vanishing point. Same with the corner down here. Goes right to it. Same with the one over here. Right to the vanishing point. Now there's a little bit of multi-planar perspective going on here because objects sitting in space tend to be just slightly off sometimes. Like if they're arranged a certain way, we aren't robots. We don't arrange our furniture in our house to be along orthogonal lines, but they tend to appear as though they are following the convention. Like it's pretty close there, just a little bit off center, like the coffee table's a little bit out there. Same with this line. Flows right to the center. And at the bottom of the couch, let's check it. It's a little off. But again, the couch is, kind of pushed out at an angle from the wall, so maybe that's why it's not perfect. But it's close. Everything is in pretty much agreement. Top of the window. It's a little bit off. Same with the interior of the window. But it's close. About the top of the TV, I'm thinking that looks like it's a little bit off too. Yeah. But you can check these things on your own if you were doing this, like if you were doing a drawing. I don't know how many of you guys have ever used Photoshop or tried to do something like this before, but you can see that most of these lines are in agreement with the direction of all these orthogonal lines that are pretty much flowing towards that central vanishing point that's there. Just dump that layer so you can see. There's my vanishing point again. I actually had a secondary vanishing point in here. I think it was like up here somewhere to show that my eye line was somewhere in between the two. Creates a different look, but it's kind of neat to do something like this, point to point, and then figure out, okay, what's the angle from there to there, from there to there. It's close. Like my angles would line up. It's not perfect. Again, because humans are not perfect. I am not perfect. I do the best I can to show you guys how this stuff works. But generally, the rules do apply. So if you're deciding that you want to do some kind of an interior, this would be an example of one-point perspective inside of a house. And I would look at it and say, okay, this looks pretty good. Maybe this is a little bit off, but you know what? Sometimes things are a little bit off. Even though this is a rule that we're supposed to follow when it comes to depicting perspective, it's not always going to be absolutely perfect. Rules are meant to be broken. If you notice them, good for you. It means you have a sharp eye. I made this up, so it's obviously not perfect, and some of the perspective might be off. I mean, it looks believable to me. I don't know about you guys, but it looks like a believable space. Let me show you another example of it. What I did to it after I did all that. Yeah, I added some color to it. Added a filter to it just for fun. Yeah, it was an exercise. It was just something to do for the heck of it. But this is just an example of an interior one-point perspective image. So whenever you guys are doing your projects, it might be something to refer to. Or you can do something else, something exterior. There are two-point perspective interior images. And if you're standing in a hallway that goes one way and another, like usually you'll find two-point perspective there. So I just wanted to share this with you since you guys in my digital imaging group are doing some similar things. I thought it would be cool to show you guys this. So that is it. So yeah, check out the project that I posted, because that's the next thing that I'd like you guys to do. And get started on it. If you have any questions, you can always email me. And other than that, good luck. I hope everybody's doing well. and we'll see you soon.